Welcome, everyone. Today's session will be recorded in around 45 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, depending on where you are joining us from in the world. We know you've probably been to thousands of Zooms by this point, and you might be exhausted by them, but we're delighted that you chose us today. As the old saying goes, if you have your health, then everything else follows. And when we have healthy women involved and leading within all sectors of our companies and communities and societies, we all win. Welcome to Her.Talks, put on by Her Health EQ. Today, we're going to have an authentic conversation around public-private partnerships. It's a tongue twister, right? Say that 6 times fast. And I'm delighted to be accompanied by this wonderful, incredible panel today. So let's start off with getting to know a little bit about who we have on our panel. Jennifer, can you start us off?
Sure thing. I'm Jennifer Iannolo, and I am the founder of Imperia, which is a global innovation incubator for women around the world who are working in social impact in a way where they want to change the world, whatever that means to them. So I'm based here in New York City, which is kind of a mini globe of its own, which makes things interesting. And I'm here today because I think there is such a compelling methodology and impact that can be made through public-private partnerships. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, Jennifer. We're delighted to hear your insights. And on to you, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Svetanoff, and I'm the program's lead of Caring Crowd, Johnson & Johnson's global public health crowdfunding platform for nonprofits to raise awareness and support projects to improve world health. I am located here in Indiana, home of Purdue University. I am in West Lafayette. It is my alma mater. I'm proud of it. I'm also proud to be a Notre Dame alumni too, so I have to represent both schools. And I'm here today because I am excited to support women's health equity. I love the work that Her Health EQ does, of course, led by Marissa. And it's one of my passions because my mother is my inspiration. She is a widowed mother of 2 kids at the time who had to start over in life when my father passed away unexpectedly. And going through like those hardships of joblessness, homelessness, and even losing health insurance made me want to help others, especially those vulnerable to health and economic disparities.
Wow, thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing that personal story.
Sure.
I think those are the type of stories that really inspire all of us and make us know that we're not alone. So thank you so much. Andy, last but not least, on the panel here today, if you can introduce yourself, say a few words, and maybe a personal story that inspires you.
Sure. I'm Andy Levy. My company is called East Park Drive. We are a cause partnership agency. I work with the United Nations, Earth Day, a couple of countries around the world, and I'm a busybody helping to put different organizations together with different brands. We try to raise awareness and support for a whole variety of issues, mostly around the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm here because I'm proud to be on the advisory board of Her Health EQ. So always looking to promote the work that they do, and happy to be here.
Well, thanks so much, Andy. Let's start back in with you, Andy, because I know that you've been in this industry for a long time and you've taught me all the ins and outs of public-private partnerships, and you're kind of my go-to person around that. So I'm sure you have some great examples. Can you share those great examples of public-private partnerships with us here today to kick us off?
Sure. I always, I'll mention too, I always think of the Walgreens partnership with the UN Foundation. They have a program called Get a Shot, Give a Shot, which is part of the UN Foundation's Shot at Life program, which is a vaccination program, not the current kind of vaccinations, but vaccinations for mostly kids in the developing world. So Walgreens created a partnership with the UN Foundation where you get your flu shot there and they will pay to vaccinate a child in the developing world. What's great about it is it drives traffic to the store. So there's a business return. It's great public relations. They're really sincere about what they're doing. They're not going there to do the vaccination, but they are funding the work of the UN Foundation. Very simple to do. Everybody wins. Really good all the way around. The other one is a project I'm working on in Jamaica right now around food security with a big brand there. They've been growing cassava as part of their production, but not very successfully. So the UN Environment Program and some other groups are coming in to help support them to have a much more efficient program, eliminate importing corn syrup from the US there. So eliminating that carbon footprint, putting people, particularly women, to work, working on soil regeneration because it's organic farming, hydroponic farming, vertical farming. So it's a win-win, again, all the way around. But again, you have to put all those moving parts together. That's kind of the secret, because the other part of it is to then sell the other produce that's being grown there to the resorts, hotels, farmers, grocers, even the cruise lines, so that the cruise lines don't have to take as much with them when they go there. So just two examples.
That's a great example. I love both of those. And really, the secret sauce is in those localized, shorter supply chains. So you're really making that happen, but also investing in the community as well. So
Exactly.
it's a win-win-win.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Rachel, over to you now, if I may, please. The phrase public-private partnership, it's not totally reflective of the involvement of all the key stakeholders, namely nonprofits. So can you shed some light on the nonprofits and how they contribute to these partnerships? And I know that you have a great background in this and have a really unique position working with this sector directly.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. While international donor agencies are prioritizing partnerships that leverage skills, resources, and networks of the private sector, it's rare that businesses are the ones that are implementing the programs themselves. And that's where the nonprofits really come into play. Like they would even provide contracts or grants to nonprofits and development organizations to conduct efforts on their behalf, albeit with a little bit of significant technical and managerial oversight. So it's really that these implementers usually develop close working relationships with corporations and serve as kind of the linchpin between the donor agency and the corporations. And it's just my thing where I believe that if the development community wants to scale and replicate like these partnerships models, we need to have a clear understanding of the contributions of different stakeholders, namely one of them being nonprofits.
It's great. They're included in the mix, not in the name, but definitely included in the mix.
Right.
Andy, back over to you, kind of a follow-up to that.
Mhm.
What can an NGO or a nonprofit do to create a partnership?
Well, they typically have someone in development. It should be everyone's job. But I think from where I stand, the nonprofit and the NGO know what they do, and they know what they stand for. So that's a given. The trick is knowing what the brands care about. That's how I work. That's what I'm always talking to somebody about something or other. But there are some links that I know you're going to share later to some online publications that every day have press releases come out, and there are stories about what brands are doing what. So you'll see who's working in your space and then reach out to them. Hey, our missions align here. Let's talk about doing something together.
That's great, Andy. And I will definitely, so that's what everybody has to stay for, definitely. So I'll post those links at the end so you can copy and paste those from the chat there. All right. So now over to you, Rachel. How can we ensure that these stakeholders are being given a seat at the table in the midst of the partnership building?
Sure thing. I think that it starts with recognition, and and to follow up with that, it's recognition of like doing talks like this that incorporate like the contributions of nonprofits or other sectors that typically don't get highlighted. And then it also stems into like being advocates and champions. At least what we do at Caring Crowd is that we love champion our nonprofits. We try to get people in touch with each other. We try to advocate and to really champion like what they're about, and we absolutely love doing that. It's part of like our DNA in who we are and what we try to do.
I love it. And I'll post that link as well to Caring Crowds at the end. So stay tuned so you can get those goodies, those takeaways. Okay, Jennifer, now we've looked at this, kind of taken it apart so we can understand it. Andy gave us some examples and then we had some best practices. So Jennifer, take us up to the 30,000 foot view, to the global arena. What can public-private partnerships look like on a global scale?
Oh my goodness, so very many things. It's kind of where, you're building the spaceship as you're flying, I guess.
Sure.
But when we're looking at global, it is so hard to quantify this in a way that's meaningful, right? Because as Andy said, the women on the ground, well, for us, the women on the ground in Imperia are the experts in their field, whether it's working with children with disabilities or in the tech sector, whatever it is. We sort of, the way we're doing this is we see Imperia as kind of a clearinghouse for ideas, where we can then go and, for example, next month, we're debriefing the US State Department on the COVID response from our members in South Asia. What have they done? What have they built? So for us, it's really, how can we get information into the hands of people who need to know what's happening at the 10-foot level, and then looking at what does that mean, from a larger scope, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit as well. So it's kind of we're constantly zooming in and out to see what questions need to be answered so that we can provide information.
Outstanding. I love that because it's that collaboration and that sharing. So what's working in one community all the way across the globe could also possibly work in another community on the other side of the globe.
Exactly. I
Fantastic.
mean, yeah. And just as an example, there's a young woman that is creating a program in Nigeria for children during COVID who do not have access to laptops. So we're trying to connect her here with organizations in New York that have managed that, because it's the same situation, right? Lack of Wi-Fi, lack of resources.
Yeah.
So we're trying to see how we can connect the dots. The whole idea with Imperia was to make the globe smaller so that we can solve problems together. So it's more of that information sharing that I was talking about.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's been a real issue. I know even here in the US, it's been an issue with students that were sent home and then they didn't have, Wi-Fi at home. Their parents couldn't afford it, or
Yeah, right here in New York,
yeah,
we have that.
absolutely. Or it's just the signal was just not strong enough to have the video in their area.
Sure.
As a follow-up, Jennifer, you talked a little bit before about the impact. So, looking at this from a global level, how do you measure that impact from a global level?
Well, this is one of those questions in progress, because
Okay.
before we started Imperia, we tried to find some good solid data to work with. And of course, WHO puts out information, so does the UN, but we were trying to find some deeper questions about the lives of women and what it looks like in particular countries. And that more granular data is hard to find. So through Imperia, we tried to look at people with projects that would impact 100 people as a minimum. And from there, we're going to measure over time, how does that exponentially grow based on what these women are doing? So it's kind of we're building the research as we research, if that makes sense, because we're trying to figure out what the questions are to answer, because there are global demographics that paint a picture, but there are some very specific examples that I discover because I travel around actually with the State Department working on women's entrepreneurship. So I was in a Scandinavian country 2 years ago where everyone thought was a great example of something that works. Everything was great. But then I had women pulling me aside after I came off the stage to say, hey, something we don't talk about here is the really high levels of domestic violence that don't get reported. So you have to sometimes dig way under the data to find out what's actually going on in a society. And so it's where we are looking to the women, again, on the ground to tell us about these problems, so then we can really do something about them.
Wow, that's incredible. And thank you for that work, and not accepting the first answer and digging deeper, because I think that's those follow-up questions and that appreciative inquiry is what's going to get us to the success. So thanks for doing that great work.
Thank you.
All right, so back to you, Andy, because I want to pick on something you said. You said I focus on the brands, what they're interested in. What does a brand look for when they're engaging with an NGO or a nonprofit? Kind of dig us deeper into that, please.
Well, it has to align with their mission. I think most brands at this point have figured out what they care about, what they stand for. Hopefully, there's a lot of new titles out there: head of diversity and inclusion, head of sustainability, which is great. Uh, but I think they, they've figured out what they care about. Now it's how do we execute? How do we create thought leadership opportunities? How do we create employee engagement opportunities? How do we get our employees involved? Because now this is an HR issue. In order to attract and retain talent, you need to say what you care about and what you stand for, particularly in industries that are, I would say, vanilla. Retail banking, not much difference between the standard banks. But if this bank cares about what I care about, I'm more likely to go there. And I don't mean to pick on the banking industry, but it's just an example. And the other is a way to create content, particularly now that we're all online and it's social media as opposed to Super Bowl spots. The company, their ad agency, the PR firm, they're looking for content around how is the brand supporting and executing on what they care about. What are they doing that we can then grab and distribute that information to get it out there. So a nonprofit or an NGO that's willing to work that way with a brand is great. Sometimes they're like, well, no, we won't do that. Well, then no one's going to play ball with you if you don't, allow the brand to leverage their support.
Interesting. Yeah, you do see more around the brands talking about stakeholder primacy instead of just shareholder primacy, and those stakeholders, really do involve the host communities that they're in, and a myriad of other things. Like I keep seeing this phrase. It's beneficial for people, for planet, and for prosperity for all. And it's all around kind of wrapping in around the purpose. I think if we all work towards purpose, then the rest kind of falls into place, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is really interesting stuff, and I'm taking some mental notes here to pass on to a lot of folks that I know. Here's the opportunity here where I'd like to switch it up a little bit, because you've heard enough of me asking questions, right? So I'd like to open up to the panel to ask questions of each other. It's a little unique thing I like to do during panels. And so I'm going to start with you, Jennifer, because I know you were thinking in advance. You said, I have some questions I'd like to ask folks on the panel. Yeah. So feel free.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, and this is the topic of conscious capitalism. It's interesting, right? It's become this buzzword now, this buzz phrase, but I distinctly remember the moment way back in 1994. I was a senior at the Stern School of Business, and we held a conference on social responsibility through entrepreneurship and what that could look like. And I remember giving my keynote to open the conference, and there was just dead silence. And they were like, what on earth are you talking about? And we had Aveda there, we had Share Our Strength there. So companies that were approaching things differently even back then. Yeah. And to now see, Andy, everything that you just talked about, right? Everything that is happening, it took 30 years ish. But it's finally like, it can be considered that you can do good and do well, and everybody wins, and it's a good thing. Yeah. And so it's really heartwarming for me to see. And I'm just wondering from, Rachel, from your perspective, and Andy, from yours, we talked about the sort of companies have to show up well to hire well. But what other trends are emerging in this conversation of conscious capitalism? What does it mean internally, Rachel, at Johnson & Johnson?
Sure. I think that at least the trends that I have seen personally is about authenticity. it's like we see that like that partnerships are becoming more strategic and more aligned, etc. But I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to how authentic you are and how much the brands and the nonprofits truly believe, and even like our consumers truly believe in what we're doing is real and for the good of everybody. Being a millennial, and also like understanding like the way Gen Z works, like they don't want to see any social responsibility that it feels like it's just doing it out of a sense of obligation or duty.
They'll call you out.
It's very, you know, we're about, we would even, and a trend that I've seen emerge is that we're even willing to purchase something more because it's eco-friendly, or because there's a stand that this brand took on a social issue. I know that I have applied that myself, as well as just seeing it anecdotally happen, like, you know, across Twitter. Like we hear about these boycotts, we hear about these, like, hey, go to this brand because, you know, their product is, you know, or at least they're taking, you know, a stance behind social justice or racial equity, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, definitely it's about authenticity.
Yeah.
Andy.
Yeah.
Rachel, I know you had some questions too you wanted to ask the panel. You're like, this is a good opportunity. Let's go over to you for the next question for the panel.
Well, I was curious if Andy was going to also answer that too. So I just wanted
to... sorry. I didn't, Andy, let's give you an opportunity.
You know, I think with the pandemic and the rough year that we've just gotten through, I think brands are looking for opportunities this year to do things that are not COVID related. Thank goodness a lot of brands stepped up and did what they could do. But I'm hearing, okay, what have you got for this year? What's coming up? A lot of it's virtual still, and that's being accepted. Earth Day is going to be mostly virtual. Last year was the 50th Earth Day, and we were expecting 500,000 people on the National Mall and couldn't do it. And this year they're like, okay, well, let's just do it virtually. And they have other programs, but brands are reacting great to that. They accept it, and they're hungry for those kinds of opportunities in a variety of causes and such. So I think that's a great trend coming up this year. Would you guys agree? Seeing that too?
I hope so. From the other side of the coin, I really hope so. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, with Johnson & Johnson working on the COVID-19 vaccine, it's a little bit related. So I'm like, well, I mean, we like to see like other, for example, at least on Caring Crowd, we like to see other campaigns and love supporting them. But one of our initiatives that we did was for some COVID-19 related campaigns. One of our other departments, Global Community Impact, also kicked in like some seed funding for those campaigns that were related to COVID-19. So that was something that was, at least with 2020, was really bringing people together and getting employees to really step up and get involved. We saw some remarkable campaigns from helping food banks to providing school supplies to children to even providing like medical relief packages. It was a lot of good work that we saw, like, you know, at least through our eyes, like seeing people like really implement and step up. It was quite remarkable, honestly. So there was a little bit of silver lining there with COVID-19, at least.
Yeah.
All right.
Would you like?
Rachel, you want to continue on with your question? Sorry, I cut you off there, Andy.
This was a question for me, Jennifer, but I want to see Andy. I want to hear it from Andy too, and I'd be happy to even like share my example first. But to start, Jennifer, how would you define empowerment, and how do you implement your perspective into partnership building?
Good question.
Yeah, so empowerment is one of those. It's one of those things that I approached less from a definition and more from a question of source and application. So what I mean by that is a lot of times we hear about empowerment in the context of we're going to go and empower girls in India, right? We're going to empower women to learn or empower women to start companies. And in this whole inquiry of all the work that I've been doing over the last decade, I started asking the question, well, okay, if we're giving it, that means we can also take it away. So that does not provide any sustainability. And we see it happen again and again in the world of charitable models, right? Charity leaves, there's a mess, and then what? And so it's this very sort of feel good, quick solution that's not really a solution. So when I'm talking about empowerment and when I'm working with these women around the world, it's really more about how does a woman create and sustain her own internal source of power so that it never leaves. And so everything that we do in the incubator is focused around that because, you know, governments collapse, economies collapse. We have women dealing with rolling blackouts so they can't get on the call for the incubator, or, you know, they're in fear of being kidnapped, or they might be arrested in particular countries for the work that they're doing for women. So we're trying to make sure that they have their own sort of solar power inside so that they are always at source of creating what they're creating.
Incredible. Wow.
I know
And that's all done through
That's
these
great.
private-public partnerships, right?
I think to kind of to share my example, I'm part of a nonprofit organization called JB Dondolo Inc. We remove barriers of access to clean water, sanitation, hygiene, and from us, and the way that this project actually got started was through Caring Crowd. That's how I met and got involved with the organization. So it is very much, you know, an integrated, very organic connection. But with us, we didn't with JB Dondolo, like we knew that there were problems, you know, with this clinic that needed addressing. And it wasn't until our founder and president, Lumbi Mwamba, went to that center that she understood that everything came from water. Like the community said, if you gave us water, like we won't even need we would even sacrifice the clinic for it. And the fact that like women and girls bear the most responsibility for collecting water, for everything, like it was almost like it was intuitive that we knew that like with our sense of empowerment, and this is kind of related to you, Jennifer, is that with this perspective in mind, like we knew like that we needed to implement like this solution and a solution that was sustainable for them for the long term. This project happened in 2012, and today like we've been able to help like a community of 20,000 still have that access to water. Recently, one of our current projects is Matopa Hills. It's called Water for Widows in Matopa Hills, Zimbabwe, and it's also focused on women and girls. It was kind of like it naturally occurring, but like the theme that we were seeing was that it was very much affecting women and girls. So it is very much like a part of who we are, and a part of like our sense, and even like my own definition of empowerment is implementing sustainable solutions so that way they can take ownership of their own health and their own needs. So yeah, that's just a bit about my own experience and I guess definition of empowerment.
Yeah, well, and that's how we create the global change, right? It really it is, if there's anything I'm really clear about, it's person by person by person, right? It's not this big thing that we sort of lay on top of society. It's one person at a time.
Yes.
Bravo.
Andy, any further comments?
About empowerment, I think, you know, obviously a lot of these programs are there to help people. Look at Her Healthy Q. These are women who don't have access to healthcare. Talk about empowerment to be alive and healthy. I think on the corporate side, empowerment is letting everyone in your company know that you're working on this project, as opposed to just the people that are in the C-suite or the people that are in sustainability or whatever. I can tell you, I do some work with Geico. Geico has a thing called Geico Cares, which is all about their employees saying, I want to support this particular nonprofit, and they'll create some kind of matching opportunity. That's great. Pepsi is famous for not having a head of CSR because they want it to be everybody's job. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Look at Johnson & Johnson. I mean, fantastic work on a whole bunch of different issues. But yeah, so obviously you're helping people and empowering women in particular, but also the people in the company
Great.
feel good, want to support it, want to volunteer, want to tell their kids, want to get involved.
Yeah, I've even heard of some studies these days around, from doctors and whatnot, when people and employees feel that they're doing rewarding, purposeful work, with these partnerships, they're actually healthier. There's trying to, I think, find the connection. There's supposedly some kind of protein. I'm sure Rachel, your scientist would be rolling over right now, because they're like, what is she talking about? But it really is. It's meaningful to give the employees that purposeful work, and like to talk about it, not like you said, Andy, not just with the C-level people, but with the entire organization. So a lot of these organizations have Slack channels now, and they have these, so you can start the messaging there and then have people join. I know when I was at a large company, I'm passionate about circular economy and getting people on board and forming these partnerships. And a lot of the salespeople came to me and said, hey, I have a company that's interested in this circular economy. So we'd love to get together and talk about this and see what the impacts that we can make. So, and it wasn't from a presentation to a C-level person. It was, like you said, from the ground up, with the whole community of people. Absolutely. All right. So we have a few minutes left here. I know, Jennifer, you had some more questions too for the panel. So this is your opportunity. Ask away.
Yeah, my biggest question for both of you really is about measurement, right? And kind of how you are crafting the measurement of the impact of what you're doing. I'm just curious to know what that looks like for both of you. Rachel?
Sure, that is something that we are currently working on.
See?
So I'm just like, ooh, that's a fantastic question, because
it's so not straightforward.
Sure. So at least like with the way that we have done so thus far, and to kind of tease about what I'm going to be implementing, is that we started with looking to see, like, how many lives that we've touched. With Caring Crowd, we touched over 1.3 million lives and counting, of course. Through, and the way that we measure that is by having the nonprofits first. They would before the project is launched, they would estimate that, but then it's later verified and revised as the projects are being implemented. And we build that trust with our nonprofits, very much with the way that we operate. Both the co-founder, John Brennick, and myself, is that we like to make sincere connection with each individual nonprofit, to learn what they're about and to understand their story, and building that trusting relationship really drives these measurements, honestly. And we have had, at least with the year 2020 to date, which was last measured through December 1st, a 96% success rate for our campaigns funded on Caring Crowd. And overall 88%, which is humongous. It's actually larger than any, or it's a greater success rate than any other crowdfunding platform that we've been able to see, at least publicly, or at least that we have seen publicly measured by comparison. And we've been able to fundraise about $4 million for over 150 nonprofits, with people who are benefiting from over 50 countries. And we have now just reached our 600th successful campaign from the time we launched.
That is incredible. Congratulations.
And something I have implemented was the Sustainable Development Goals aspect. We have helped advance 13 out of the 17. And what we're hoping to do is look through like the targets and indicators and see where those have aligned. And that's more of like a passion project of mine. Yeah. But I believe that it's really important, because if we are to do this together and kind of like hone in on this theme of partnership building, is that we need to focus on these type of global goals that everybody wants to achieve to make the world a better place.
Right.
So yeah, that's at least
That's
metric
fantastic.
/ measurement wise. Yeah.
Yeah.
1 point, was it 3 million people? That's incredible.
hmm
That was just with one
No, no, no.
campaign?
That was from all
That's
the
the total, yeah.
The
yeah,
total,
from
oh,
yeah.
whoa, that's a lot. You'd be in the Guinness Book of World Records for the other one. Yeah. But still, I mean, it's just so nice to see these big numbers of real impact. And you start, like you said, Jennifer, you start one person at a time. And you know that 1.3 million start with one person, right? That's incredible.
Exactly.
Andy, any questions for the two ladies on our panel today?
Oh my goodness.
Not to put you, if you don't have any, that's all right. It's okay.
I
Just
don't.
giving
I'm
you
just,
opportunity.
it's always great to talk with people who are doing great work in the world. I'm in awe of all you guys, and I'm very happy to be the guy that makes a few connections here and there. Jennifer, you asked about data and collection and all that stuff. I take people out to lunch for a living and make phone calls. So it's not my area. I didn't have any answer for you there.
That's fine.
But you guys really, really do the work. It's great. And it's been so great to work with Rachel and refer a lot of the nonprofits I work with to her.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, just, it's a joy to do this work. I'm sure you all feel the same way.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We have a question that's come in from our panelists, and so with our 4 minutes left here, I'd love to share Mahima's question. She says, first, thanks for this great panel. And she talks about, you have touched on public partnerships. My question is on a similar lines. Being from a small town in India, seeing the lack of healthcare facilities and investing past year in market research, what I have seen is that, let me keep scrolling here. What I've seen is that there are multiple innovation solutions. We know there's no, limit to the innovations that are out there. Some being led by private entities, some by public. I keep scrolling here. On a bigger scale, when we talk about more sustainable, equitable frameworks, this requires for integrated solutions for different pain points. What is the scope of a consortium formed by partnership between multiple private and public entities, focusing their efforts and resources to solve the common bigger problem? If you could shed some light on that. Excellent, very detailed. We wish all our questions were this perfect. So who would like to take Mahima's question?
Well, there are several organizations, obviously the United Nations, working all over the world on a whole bunch of issues. And then there are separate entities within the UN. They always welcome inquiries. You can just reach out to them. There's Business Fights Poverty, there's CECP, there are several organizations. You guys are probably members of some of them. And I think we posted some of them, or maybe we can post later on the Her.Talks site, which you can go visit. Some of these organizations that are not conglomerates. I'm sorry, what was the word that you used?
Consortiums.
Consortiums. Yeah, of companies, brands, NGOs, et cetera, et cetera. There are plenty of those out there. It's just about getting in front of them.
Yeah.
Jennifer, Rachel, any responses to Mahima's question?
The first thing that came to my mind was listing off all of the ones in global health. So I thought of like the Consortium of Universities for Global Health, the Bay Area Alliance for Global Health, and it's just so many more. So at least like within the global health space, we've been able to see that consortiums do play a large role in tackling some of these larger issues, and even in ways that didn't start off at first, they've been able to tackle things like along the way, and in their own way, like come up with their own niche of being able to do these solutions in ways that like single partnerships can't. I think it just, like the old adage says, it takes a village to raise a baby. It takes the world to help the world, It
does. Yeah. And there is actually in India, one of our partners is 1M1B, 1 million for 1 billion. And they've been bringing together actually teenagers transforming India. And they've had a lot of projects around health, everything from like mobile health trucks that go to villages to, so we are starting to see organizations like, even like with what Imperia is trying to do, we're trying to kind of build that as well. But yeah, they're doing a lot of great work in India.
Great. And Rachel, if you could just say those organizations one more time for people to note.
Yes, yeah. So the Consortium of Universities for Global Health, the Bay Area Alliance for Global Health, Women in Global Health. The list is going to go on, but I think those were the main three that I mentioned.
And yours as well, Jennifer?
So I posted it in the chat,
Thank you.
activate1m1b.org.
Great. I think Mahima now has some research
work
to
to
do.
Yeah.
lots of links to dig into in organizations and some reading. Hopefully, Mahima, we effectively answered your question for you. I see you nodding. Thank you so much for that question. All right, I think we're right at our time. Let's end with your inspirational one quote that you'd like to leave us all with. Something either fun or funny, and then we'll close the meeting and we'll make sure that we have this posted on the website, on the Her Health EQ website. Please go there because we'll have all these links there. Like Andy said, it's a great organization to read about and share with your different companies and different groups. So who should I start us off? Well, Andy, let's go with the lettering here. Your first name starts with A. So
Yeah, when I was in kindergarten, I wondered why I was never first. That I always went by my last name. I was like, but
well,
it's
here's your
A.
chance. Now you're first.
Here's my chance, finally, after all these years. Look, it's going to be a great year. It's going to be better than last year, but this is the year we're back in the game, signing the Paris Agreement tomorrow. All that good stuff. A lot of motion in the ocean and around the planet on a whole bunch of issues. Get involved, learn about what you can do, and participate.
Oh, that's good to leave us on there. And how about for you, Rachel?
Yeah, for me, it and it's even in my email signature. It's a quote that I try to live by every single day, and it's by J.R.R. Tolkien. And if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, kudos. and it goes, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. So there are always going to be factors that are out of our control, but what we do have power, what we are empowered or enabled or enfranchised to be able to do, it now's the time to implement that, to take advantage of it, and to apply it in every day of our lives. So
my dad was a big JR fan, so I heard a lot of those quotes. That's great. It reminds me of Mary Oliver and, what are you going to do with your one wild and crazy life, right? So great impact, right? And Jennifer, how about for you?
Two very short ones. One is one a friend said to me years ago, and it is to leave people better than you found them. And the other, just to kind of wrap up this crazy roller coaster ride, is wine is bottled poetry.
Fantastic. We will leave on that note. So again, check out the website, Her Health EQ, so we can, share that recording with you through that medium. And many thanks to Marissa for all these wonderful Her.Talks and bringing us inspiration as well as information for our companies and ourselves. Thank you so much, everyone, and stay tuned for the next Her Talk.
Thanks, Faith.
Thank you.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.